Rain hammered the metal staircase as my landlord hurled my suitcase from the second floor and screamed at me in front of half the building, telling me he would not let broke girls destroy his property. My clothes burst across the wet concrete, soaking instantly, while neighbors peeked through cracked doors and whispered as if my humiliation were some free entertainment. I knelt on the cold pavement gathering shirts and jeans with shaking hands, feeling the sting of rain mixed with the heat of shame rising up my neck. My phone vibrated in my back pocket, and for a moment I considered ignoring it because I had nothing left in me to deal with another problem, but the number flashing on the screen was unfamiliar. I answered anyway, expecting a call about another overdue bill. Instead, a precise and icy voice said my full name as if reading it from a legal document. Olivia Carter. My breath hitched. Yes. Who is this? I asked. The voice did not hesitate. My name is Evelyn Harrington. Every news article, every business segment, every charity gala flashed through my head at once. She was the kind of woman who built empires while everyone else was still asleep. She did not call people like me. She barely acknowledged people like me existed. Before I could respond, she continued, I am aware of your current situation. I can offer a solution. Come to Harrington Hall within the hour. The call ended. No explanation, no warmth. No option to decline, only an order. I had $42 in my account, a soaked suitcase, and a mother in a hospital bed. So I went. The iron gates of Harrington Hall towered above me, taller and more imposing than anything I had ever seen. Two security guards stepped forward with straight spines and narrowed eyes. State your name, one demanded. When I said it, his eyebrow arched as if he expected someone wealthier, cleaner, or simply better. He held my ID between two fingers like something delicate and unpleasant. Guests here usually do not look like you. The gate opened slowly with a groan that echoed how unwelcome I was. Walking the long driveway toward the mansion, I felt the weight of the cameras tracking me, judging me. A housekeeper opened the front door before I even reached the steps. Her gaze swept over my wet jeans and tangled hair. This way, she said, already irritated by my existence. She led me into a parlor filled with marble floors, oil paintings, and silence so heavy it felt choreographed. Then I heard footsteps, slow, measured, certain. Evelyn Harrington entered as if the air in the room shifted to accommodate her. Her hair was silver and sculpted, her suit fitted so perfectly, it looked like it had been cut directly onto her body, and her presence was sharp enough to cut glass. She did not greet me, she examined me. Sit, she said, and the single word carried enough authority to make me obey without question. She remained standing as if to remind me who held the power. Your rent has been 3 months overdue. Your mother's medical bills are accumulating. Your credit is failing. You were let go from the diner last week. You have no savings and no support. My stomach twisted. How do you know all that? I whispered. I investigate before I choose. Choose. As if I were an item on a shelf she had been comparing with others. She stepped closer. I can erase your debts and provide full medical care for your mother, but I require something in return. My pulse hammered in my throat. What do you want? She looked directly into my eyes, unblinking. I want you to marry me, Olivia. The world stopped moving. You want to marry me legally, publicly, immediately. In exchange, you receive the financial stability you lack. I stared at her, trying to understand what kind of game this was, but her expression remained unreadable. Why me? I managed to ask. Because you are suitable. You are independent, unattached, and you need what I can offer. That makes our partnership efficient. She spoke about marriage the way people spoke about contracts or mergers. My phone buzzed again. I stepped away from her long enough to answer. The nurse on the line sounded urgent. Ms. Carter, your mother's condition is worsening. Without confirmation of payment tonight, we cannot schedule the surgery. Tonight. The word struck my chest like a hammer. I could not return to the streets. I could not lose my mother. And I had no one else. I turned back to Evelyn. She had not moved. She already knew the answer written across my face. Do you accept? She asked. I felt my pride dissolve in my throat, replaced by fear and desperation. "Yes," I whispered. A lawyer appeared almost instantly with a marriage license already prepared. I picked up the pen. The ink bled onto the paper in a single trembling stroke. As soon as I signed my name, something in the room shifted. Evelyn's expression eased into something like satisfaction. Mine tightened with dread. I had not been rescued. I had been claimed, and I did not yet understand the true cost of what I had just agreed to. The morning after I signed the marriage license, a black town car waited at the base of the mansion steps as if it had been summoned before the sun even rose. A driver in a sharp suit stood beside the open door without making eye contact, as if looking at me directly might break some unspoken rule. "Mrs. Harrington is expecting you," he said. The new title hit me like a weight I was not strong enough to carry. I slid into the back seat, my stomach twisting as the door shut behind me with the heavy thud of something final. The car rolled down the long driveway, past the iron gates, past the life I used to know, and towards something I was not sure I was ready to face. We stopped in front of a white modern law office made of glass and angles, the kind of place where every pen probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Evelyn was already inside, seated at a long table surrounded by stacks of folders, each labeled with color-coded tabs that looked like a battlefield arranged in perfect order. She did not greet me. She simply gestured at the chair across from her. A man in a gray suit stood behind her with a laptop open. Another flipped through documents without acknowledging my existence. "This is my legal team," Evelyn said, her tone making it clear they were not here for me. "We need to finalize the paperwork that follows our marriage." "There is more paperwork," I asked. The man with the laptop finally glanced at me, but only briefly, as though confirming I was the correct file rather than a person. "Marriage license, prenuptial agreements, estate planning trust, restructuring, designation of spousal rights, medical power of attorney beneficiary updates." He listed as if reading from an endless grocery list. My pulse ticked faster with every term. "All of this is necessary," Evelyn said. "You will be my legal spouse. Your signature is required. Required for what exactly I asked. My estate," she answered simply. "My assets, my trust, my companies, my holdings. My family has been attempting to challenge my decisions. A spouse cannot be bypassed. You are a legal barrier." I stared at her hands on the table. Perfectly still. Perfectly certain. "So, I am here to block someone." "You are here because I selected you," she said, not unkindly, but with the clinical tone of a surgeon explaining a procedure. The first document slid toward me. The lawyer tapped at the bottom line where my name was printed in bold letters. "Sign." His eyes never met mine. Not once. As if I did not deserve the courtesy. I picked up the pen, but the moment the tip hovered over the paper, Evelyn's voice cut through the room like a cold blade. "Read page 3, she said. "It clarifies your obligations." I turned to page 3. My throat tightened as my eyes scanned the words. I would be living full-time at Harrington Hall. I would keep my public image discreet. I would attend certain functions with Evelyn when required. I would notify her legal team before making any major decision. It was a contract disguised as a marriage, or a marriage disguised as a contract. I could not tell which. Still, I signed. The lawyer collected the paper instantly, replacing it with another, and another, and another. Hours passed. My signature multiplied across documents I barely understood. No one offered me water. No one asked if I needed a break. No one explained why my name was now tied to accounts and funds and responsibilities far outside my world. When the final sheet was signed, Evelyn rose smoothly from her chair. "Now it is official," she said. "You are integrated into my estate." Integrated, not welcomed, not included. Integrated, like a financial instrument. She nodded to the lawyers who closed their folders in perfect synchronization. Then she turned to me. "You will return to Harrington Hall now. Your room has been prepared." I hesitated. What exactly did I just agree to? For the first time, Evelyn's expression softened, but only slightly, the way a winter sky softens without ever becoming warm. "Security," she said, "for both of us." She walked past me without waiting for a response, her heels clicking against the polished floor, leaving me standing alone in a room full of papers that now defined my life better than I did. The driver escorted me back to the car. The ride felt shorter this time, though. That was probably because my mind was racing faster than the wheels. When we reached Harrington Hall again, Collins was waiting at the entrance as if he had anticipated the exact minute of my arrival. His eyes moved briefly to the folder of documents in my hand. "So it is done," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "She said it is for security." Collins gave a faint, humorless smile. "People like Mrs. Harrington do not build their lives on security. They build it on control." A chill crept through me. Control of what everything he said. People, money, legacies, stories. He paused before adding, "And now you are part of that." He led me inside. The hallways felt narrower than the day before. Cameras that I had barely noticed earlier seemed to follow me more openly now, like watchful eyes attached to invisible strings. I passed a pair of housekeepers whispering near the staircase. When they saw me, their voices dropped to harsh silence. One of them glanced at my ringless hand, then at the documents I carried and gave a look I could not interpret. Pity, fear, maybe both. My new room was large and decorated in shades of cream and gold, but the elegance only made the lack of warmth more obvious. It felt like a guest room in a museum rather than a space for a living person. A note rested on the nightstand. The handwriting was meticulous. "Dinner is at 7. Do not be late. E.H." I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my hands together to keep them from shaking. I had thought the signing of those papers was the end of something, a rescue, a relief. But as I looked around the room that was now supposedly mine, one truth settled heavily on my chest. I had not escaped my life. I had stepped into someone else's, and I had no idea how to step back out. The first full day I spent inside Harrington Hall felt less like moving into a home, and more like being admitted into an institution built for silence. Even the air smelled different, cold, and filtered like it had been processed before I was allowed to breathe it. The mansion was enormous, but not in a warm, old Hollywood way. It was vast in the way government buildings feel vast, purposeful, intimidating, watching me. When I stepped into the hallway that morning, 2 housekeepers passed by without acknowledging me. Their eyes flicked up only long enough to confirm I was exactly where they expected me to be. Then they continued whispering to each other. I could not make out their words, but I caught the tone. Unease, suspicion, a kind of exhausted familiarity, like they had seen my situation before and already knew how it would end. I made my way toward the grand staircase, trying to memorize the layout so I would not look lost. The walls were lined with portraits of Harrington ancestors, stern faces, rigid posture, and the kind of expressions that suggested they did not smile even in private. At the bottom of the stairs, Collins waited with his hands folded behind his back. He looked less like a butler and more like a guardian forced into service. "Mrs. Harrington would like you to join her for breakfast," he said. His tone was formal, but I sensed something beneath it. Maybe concern, maybe warning. He led me through a series of hallways that felt like identical copies of one another until we reached a small dining room with tall windows and a long table far too large for 2 people. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, already halfway through her meal. She did not look up when I entered. She simply tapped the side of her glass with one finger, signaling where she wanted me to sit. "Good morning," I said, unsure of the proper etiquette when greeting a woman who technically was now my spouse. She did not respond. She continued reading from a stack of documents placed beside her plate. I sat quietly, unsure whether to start eating the food a housekeeper had placed in front of me. Eggs, fruit toast. Everything arranged neatly, beautifully, but somehow still uninviting. After several minutes of silence, Evelyn finally spoke. "You will need to adjust to the routines here," she said without raising her eyes. "Harrington Hall is a household built on structure." I nodded, though she still was not looking at me. "I understand." "Do you?" she asked. The question lingered in a way that made me doubt myself. I opened my mouth to clarify, but a sudden metallic clank echoed faintly from somewhere in the distance. Evelyn did not react, but Collins stiffened behind me. I turned slightly. What was that? Evelyn cut a piece of fruit with exacting precision. This is a large house, Olivia. Old houses make noise. The answer was too smooth, too prepared. I let it go for the moment. After breakfast, I asked if I might explore the house a little more. Evelyn waved a hand in a vague gesture that could have meant yes or could have meant she did not care. "Stay out of the West Wing," she said. "It is closed for renovation." I pretended to accept the explanation, but something in her voice made the hairs on my arms rise. Renovation did not sound like the truth. As the day went on, I wandered through corridors filled with antiques and expensive artwork. Every room looked curated pristine, untouched by anything resembling actual life. Painted vases placed at perfect angles, rugs without a single wrinkle, lamps that seemed chosen more for aesthetics than lighting. But the deeper I went into the mansion, the more oppressive the atmosphere felt. At one point, as I passed by a closed door near the east corridor, I heard faint footsteps inside, followed by a soft click like a lock sliding into place. When I leaned in, whoever was inside fell silent. "Can I help you?" Collins's voice came from behind me, startling me so violently that I took a step back. He stood in the hallway's shadow, watching me too closely. I heard something I said. A door. Closing. Doors close in this house. By themselves, he did not answer. He simply looked at me with that same expression from before, something between pity and warning, and said, "Try not to wander alone. Harrington Hall is large. People can become disoriented." I should have asked more questions, but the warning was enough to make me retreat to the main floor. That evening, dinner was even quieter than breakfast. The silence no longer felt like formality. It felt like surveillance, like the walls themselves were listening. Afterward, when Evelyn dismissed me for the night, I walked slowly back toward my room. The hallway near the center of the house curved slightly and split into two paths. To the left was the guest wing. To the right was a long corridor flanked by dark wooden doors, each identical, each shut. The west wing was at the very end, marked only by a subtle change in the floor tile and the faint outline of a heavier lock. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about that wing felt wrong, felt forbidden for reasons that had nothing to do with renovation. Suddenly, a soft mechanical hum rose from behind the door, then a faint thud, then silence. My pulse quickened. "Do not go down there." Collins had appeared again, his voice low and strained. He was closer this time, close enough that I felt the urgency in the air around him. "I was just walking," I said. "No," he replied. "You were thinking." He stepped forward, his expression grave. "The West Wing is not for you. It has not been for anyone for a very long time." "Why not?" I whispered. He exhaled slowly, as though choosing his words with caution. "Some rooms in this house hold more than furniture. They hold history, and history can be dangerous when disturbed." I swallowed hard. My heart thudded in my chest. Is there something I should know? His gaze flicked toward the closed door, then back to me. "There is plenty you should know," he said quietly. "But none of it is safe." He turned and walked away before I could speak again. I stood alone in the hallway, the chill of his warning settling deep into my bones. I had thought Harrington Hall was simply cold, but now I realized it was colder because something inside it was alive and watching, and whatever it was, it did not want me there. By the third day inside Harrington Hall, I began to understand that silence was not an accident here. It was a rule, a weapon, a message, one that pressed against me more heavily with each hour that passed. Evelyn's schedule arrived every morning on a silver tray outside my door, written in precise cursive by someone who clearly understood her expectations better than I did. Wake at 7, breakfast at 7:30, accompany her to her study at 8. Review documents I did not understand, sit in meetings I had no business being in, remain quiet unless spoken to. There were small notes beside each line telling me where to stand, where to sit, and which door to use when entering or exiting certain rooms. I wanted to believe it was an attempt to help me adjust to her routines, but it felt more like instructions for handling a delicate object, or controlling one. That morning, she had me join her in a smaller study lined with shelves of leather-bound books. She was on a conference call when I arrived, her voice firm, each word laid out with the precision of a seasoned negotiator. Marcus has no authority over the trust, she said into her phone. If he attempts another amendment, I will take the matter to court. She clicked the call off without a goodbye. I stood by the door, unsure if she wanted me closer. Sit, she said. Her eyes were already scanning new documents on the table. She signed them swiftly, one after another, while I tried to keep up with the terminology floating past me. Trust restructuring, beneficiary revision, capital reallocation. At one point, I asked gently, "Do you want me to help with anything?" She glanced up at me, but only for a breath. "You are helping by being here." The sentence unsettled me in a way I could not explain. She returned to reading, and I sat still, feeling like a shadow disguised as a person. Later, during lunch, the tension in the house grew thicker. I noticed the staff moving faster, whispering more, avoiding my gaze completely now. A housekeeper bumped into me and apologized without looking up. Another one hesitated before entering the dining room with Evelyn's meal, her hands shaking slightly as though carrying something far heavier than a silver tray. When I stepped outside onto the terrace for air, my phone rang. I expected it to be the hospital again, but instead, Marcus's face appeared on the screen through a video call request. My stomach dropped. I had seen him in photographs always looking polished and successful next to his older sister at charity events and corporate galas. I had not yet met him in person. I answered hesitantly. "Hello?" His face filled the screen, immediately sharp features, immaculate hair, an expression carved somewhere between amusement and contempt. "So you are the new spouse," he said, not bothering with introductions. His voice dripped with the kind of casual cruelty that people with too much privilege wear like cologne. I swallowed. "I am Olivia." "Yes, I know what you are," he said. I just did not expect her to pick someone quite so plain. He said the word plain as if it were an insult he had perfected over years of practice. I felt heat tighten in my chest. "Is there a reason you are calling me?" Marcus leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Just wanted to see the girl my sister scooped off the sidewalk to use as a pawn." I stiffened. "I am not a pawn." He laughed at that, a sharp, humorless sound. "Of course you are. She collects them. You just happen to be the latest piece on her board. And trust me, the game she is playing is far older than you think." Before I could respond, he ended the call. No warning, no courtesy. Just a sudden blank screen that made the terrace feel colder than before. My hands shook as I slipped my phone into my pocket. I tried to tell myself he was lying, manipulating, trying to scare me, but the tremor beneath his words felt real. Too real. When I walked back inside, Evelyn was waiting in the hallway, her posture tense in a way I had not seen before. "Who were you speaking to?" she asked. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "Marcus called me," I admitted. "He said some things." "Ignore him," she snapped, surprising me with the sudden edge in her voice. "He thrives on chaos. Do not give him attention." She turned abruptly and began walking toward her wing of the house. When I hesitated, she called back. "Come. There are documents that require your signature." The rest of the afternoon blurred into a series of pages placed in front of me and pens pressed into my hand. Most of the documents involved trust protections, modifications to corporate bylaws, and updates to power of attorney. I tried to read them first, but the language felt deliberately impenetrable. When the last document slid toward me, something inside me pushed back. I held the pen without signing. "Why do you need me for all of this?" I asked. Evelyn looked up slowly. For the first time since I entered the house, her expression revealed something fragile, thin, almost like fear, but it disappeared as quickly as it surfaced. "Because I trust myself," she said, eyes narrowing. "And I need someone who is not Marcus. Someone I can predict." The words hit me heavier than I expected. Predict. Not trust. Not rely on. Predict. I signed the paper, but my hand trembled. That evening, I found myself pacing in my room, replaying the day in my head. Marcus's smirk, Evelyn's command, the signatures binding me to decisions I barely understood. The house felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air heavier. I opened my door to head downstairs, but froze when I heard footsteps echoing faintly near the West Wing corridor. Slow, measured, deliberate. I followed the sound until I reached the far end of the hallway. A caretaker was adjusting a thermostat nearby. When he saw me, his eyes widened in alarm. "You should not be this close," he whispered urgently. "Please, go back." "Why?" I asked. "What is in there?" He shook his head, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "Nothing good for you." He hurried away before I could ask anything else. I stood alone in that corridor again, the silence humming under my skin. Something was wrong inside Harrington Hall. Not just with the documents or the rules or the way Evelyn watched me. Something deeper, something older, and whatever it was beginning to crack through the surface. By the end of my first week in Harrington Hall, I had grown used to the constant sensation that every step I took was being measured, watched, judged. The staff's whispers had become quieter but more frequent, like they were bracing for something none of them dared name. And Evelyn's behavior had shifted in small, unsettling ways. She spoke to me with the same cool authority she always had, but sometimes I caught her studying me as if trying to see whether I still fit whatever purpose she had chosen me for. That morning began like any other, with breakfast eaten in silence on opposite ends of an absurdly long table. The storm outside had darkened the windows, and the sound of rain tapping the glass echoed through the room like a warning. After breakfast, Evelyn asked me to join her in her private sitting room, a place I had never been allowed before. The room was smaller than her study, but filled with old paintings, shelves of arranged photographs, and a vintage escritoire covered in folded letters. She sat by the window, reading reports while I stood awkwardly near the door, unsure whether to speak or wait. "Come here," she said without looking up. I walked closer. She finally lifted her eyes to me. "Hold this," she said, offering a stack of papers. When I reached for them, one of the pages slipped out of my grasp. We both bent down at the same time, and as my hand brushed the floor, something metallic slid from her blazer pocket and clattered near my shoe. A small silver key lay on the rug, catching the faint light from the window. I froze. The key was slim, old-fashioned, and engraved with tiny letters so small I had to squint to read them. West Wing. My pulse hammered. The West Wing was the one part of the house everyone avoided talking about, the one place I had been warned away from repeatedly. I hesitated for a moment before reaching for the key, but before my fingers touched it, Evelyn's hand shot out, faster than I would have believed possible for someone her age. She snatched the key from the floor and held it tightly, her knuckles whitening. Her eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. "Where did you see that?" she demanded. "It fell," I said, startled. "From your jacket." Her gaze sharpened even more. "Do not touch anything that does not belong to you." I swallowed hard. "I did not mean to. I just... do not," she repeated, cutting off my explanation with a tone far more severe than the words themselves. She placed the key back in her pocket with a strange protectiveness, almost like she feared someone would take it from her, or like she feared what would happen if they did. The silence stretched between us before she returned to her papers, acting as if nothing had occurred. But her hand lingered near the pocket where she kept the key, as if ensuring it never left her reach again. The tension between us did not loosen for the rest of the morning. After I left the room, I went looking for Collins. When I found him in the hallway outside the library, he was polishing a brass frame on the wall. I approached him quietly. "Collins," I whispered, "have you seen a key before? A silver one with West Wing engraved on it." His shoulders stiffened, and the cloth in his hand froze mid-polishing. It was the smallest pause, but unmistakable. He turned toward me with a slow, tired expression. "Why are you asking?" "It fell from her pocket," I said. She got angry. Really angry. Collins sighed as though he had expected this moment to arrive. "You were never supposed to see that key." "Why not?" I asked. "What does it open?" He glanced around the hallway before answering in a low, tight voice. "The past." I frowned. "That does not tell me anything." He lowered his cloth and stepped a little closer enough that I could see the worry in his eyes. "There are rooms in this house that were meant to stay closed. Rooms tied to events that were never resolved. Mrs. Harrington is a woman who learned long ago that controlling a story is the only way to survive it." "You mean she is hiding something?" Collins did not confirm it, but he did not deny it either. Whatever you think you want to know, Olivia, ask yourself whether you can live with the answer. His words left a cold ache in my chest. I should have walked away, but instead I found myself compelled even more strongly toward the truth. The key had cracked something open in me. A need, a hunger, a sense that I had stumbled onto something essential and dangerous. Throughout the rest of the day, every corner of the mansion seemed to whisper at me. Every closed door felt heavier. Every employee watched me too closely or not at all. At dinner, Evelyn spoke less than usual. She kept her pocketed hand near her side the entire meal as though ensuring the key was safe. When she finally rose from the table, she left without dismissing me, a sign that something inside her had shifted. That night, a storm rolled across the estate. Thunder shook the windows. Tree branches scraped against the glass. I sat awake in bed replaying everything. The key, the panic in Evelyn's voice, the warning in Collins's eyes, and above all the word engraved on that tiny piece of metal, West Wing, the place I had been told not to go, the place Evelyn protected like a limb, the place that made the staff's voices drop to whispers. I stood up and paced, unable to calm the restless energy in my chest. It felt like something inside me was being pulled toward that door, pulled with a force stronger than fear, stronger than caution, strong enough to drown out every warning I had been given. It was nearly 2 a.m. when the storm reached its loudest. A flash of lightning illuminated the hallway outside my room. In that moment, I made a choice. I opened my door, stepped into the darkness, and began walking toward the West Wing. I did not know yet what the key unlocked. I did not know why Evelyn clutched it like it was her lifeline, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever the truth was behind that locked door, it was waiting for me. The house was silent when I stepped into the hallway, except for the storm that pounded against the windows like fists demanding entrance. Every shadow along the walls felt denser, as if the mansion itself had grown aware of my intentions and was holding its breath. I moved quietly the wooden floor, creaking softly beneath my feet, each sound magnified in the cavernous silence. The West Wing corridor stretched ahead like a long spine of darkness. Only a faint strip of moonlight leaking through a skylight guided my way. The deeper I walked, the colder the air became, as though the temperature dropped with every step I took. I told myself it was the draft from the old part of the house, but deep down I knew it was not the cold that unnerved me. It was the anticipation, the feeling that something behind those walls had been waiting for years, waiting for someone to open it, or waiting for someone to leave it alone. When I finally reached the end of the corridor, I froze in front of the heavy wooden door. It was larger than the others, with panels carved in intricate patterns. A long metal lock hung beneath the handle, polished from use, but the keyhole was tiny, almost hidden within the design. The same shape, the same size, identical to the small silver key that had dropped from Evelyn's pocket earlier that day. My breath caught in my throat. I did not have her key, but someone had left a ring of spare household keys in a small cabinet near the door earlier. I had seen them when Collins guided me through the house last week. I slid one out earlier in the evening. A copy. Not silver. Brass. My fingers shook as I inserted it. For a moment, I feared it would not work. But then, with a soft click, the lock turned. The door opened slowly, releasing a stale breath of air that smelled of old paper and the faint trace of something metallic, a scent like forgotten grief. Inside the room was dark except for the thin glow of moonlight filtering through tall, dusty curtains. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. It felt wrong to leave it open, as if the shadows might slip out and expose me before I was ready. My eyes adjusted gradually. The space revealed itself piece by piece. Not a bedroom, not a storage space, but an office. Or, rather, the remains of one. A large oak desk sat near the window, its surface covered with scattered files, faded notes, and a pair of cracked reading glasses. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, but many books lay toppled over or stacked in messy piles like someone had searched frantically through them years ago and never bothered to put anything back in place. Everything in the room seemed untouched since that moment, as if time had been paused or abandoned. I walked toward the desk, my steps hesitant, as though each movement might stir ghosts that had been sleeping too lightly. The first thing I saw was a picture frame lying face down. I picked it up, dusted it off, and turned it over. My heart lurched. It was Evelyn, decades younger, standing beside a tall man with broad shoulders and gentle eyes, her late husband. But something was wrong. The frame had once held a second photo tucked behind it, and that photo had been torn. A figure ripped away on one side of the image. All that remained was a partial hand resting on the husband's shoulder. A man's hand. My stomach twisted. I set the picture down carefully and reached for the papers on the desk. Most were old financial statements from Harrington Global, the company Evelyn's husband once co-owned. But beneath the stack, I found a folder labeled Internal Audit. I opened it. Inside were notes, annotations, and red ink underlining errors in financial reports from the year the company collapsed. I flipped through page after page until a name stopped my breath. Daniel Carter. My father. The words beside his name blurred for a moment as I tried to steady my eyes. Fraud, misreporting, negligence. The accusations were printed harshly, each line a fresh blow. I felt the ground tilt slightly beneath me. Why would my father's name be in Evelyn's locked office? Why would she keep these documents here, hidden from everyone else? What did she believe he had done? I kept reading. The deeper I went, the more painful it became. Notes written in a sharp, angry hand filled the margins. Lies. He ruined us. He destroyed Harold. He will pay for this. Another page detailed how the company collapsed after the financial discrepancies were discovered. A paragraph at the bottom explained how the stress had worsened Harold Harrington's heart condition. He died 2 months later. My hand shook as I closed the folder. The story formed itself piece by piece. A marriage ruined, a family destroyed, a fortune lost, a husband dead. In Evelyn's eyes, all of it connected back to one person, my father, And now through me, she had found a way to rewrite that ending. A plan 20 years in the making. A chill traveled through me as a faint thud echoed from somewhere outside the room. I lifted my head slowly. The house was silent again, but the sound had been real. Maybe a door closing. Maybe footsteps. Maybe something else. I moved quickly through the rest of the desk, searching for anything that might explain more. That was when I found the journal, a small leather-bound book hidden beneath loose papers. I opened it carefully. The first page was dated 19 years ago. The handwriting was unmistakably Evelyn's. I turned the pages slowly, each entry tightening a knot in my stomach. He will not get away with what he did. He took Harold from me. He took my life. I will not rest until his family pays for what he did. One day, I will have what I need. One day, I will take everything back. My breath stopped. I flipped further. Months, years, plans, research, notes about me. A line written more recently. I found the daughter. She will be the key. I closed the journal, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The truth was undeniable now. Evelyn had chosen me for one reason. Not love, not companionship, revenge. A sudden coldness swept through the room. I turned toward the door. The faint light beneath the crack flickered briefly. Someone had walked by. Someone knew I was here. Someone who should not have. My pulse pounded in my ears as I whispered into the darkness more to myself than anyone else. What have I stepped into? I stood frozen in the center of the room, the journal still clutched in my hands. The silence that settled around me felt heavier than anything I had encountered since entering Harrington Hall. It was no longer the passive quiet of an old house. It was an active one, alert and listening, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would do next. My pulse thudded painfully in my ears. The faint flicker of shadow beneath the door had been real. Someone had stopped there. Someone had paused long enough to notice light beneath the threshold. I quickly placed the journal back on the desk, arranging the papers the way I had found them. My fingers shook so badly that I nearly knocked over a stack of files. I forced myself to breathe. Slow, quiet, controlled. The footsteps did not return, but the stillness outside the door now felt like a trap rather than safety. I cracked the door open an inch and peered into the hallway. Empty. The corridor stretched in both directions, washed in pale moonlight lined with portraits that stared as though judging my intrusion. I stepped into the hall and closed the door behind me, pressing it gently so the latch would not click loudly. I had taken only 2 steps when a voice struck the air behind me. "Enjoying yourself?" It was Evelyn. I froze, every muscle in my body locking at once. Her silhouette emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall. She walked forward slowly, her posture straight, her hands clasped behind her back. Even in the dim light, I could see the sharpness in her eyes. Not anger, not yet. Something more calculating. "You should not be awake at this hour," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a coldness underneath it that made my skin prickle. "I could say the same," I replied, hating how small my voice sounded. She stopped a few feet from me, her gaze flicking past me toward the West Wing door. "You went into Harold's office." It was not a question. My throat tightened. The door was unlocked. "No," she said softly. "It was not." I opened my mouth, but no explanation came out. The words tangled themselves into fear. Evelyn stepped closer until she was close enough that I could see the faint tremble in the muscles around her jaw. "You read things that do not belong to you." "They had my father's name on them," I said, forcing the words out. "Why would you keep those documents locked away? Why would you hide them?" Her eyes sharpened like ice forming over deep water. "Because they are mine. You think my father caused everything that happened to your husband?" I said, my voice rising. "You think he destroyed your company. You think he ruined your life. But you never asked what really happened. You never even tried to see if the story you believed was true." Her breath hitched, barely noticeable. But it was enough. A crack. A weakness. I pressed. My father was not a monster. Evelyn moved so quickly I almost stepped back. "Your father," she said, each word clipped and slow, "was a liar who hid behind a charming facade. He cost me everything. He cost Harold the last years of his life. And he cost my family its legacy." I shook my head. "You do not know that. You only know what you wanted to believe." She stared at me for a long, suffocating moment. Then she said quietly, "People like your father do not leave evidence behind. They leave consequences." "That is not justice," I whispered. "That is obsession." Something flashed in her eyes. Pain. Old, unresolved pain. The kind that never healed properly. "Do not presume to understand my losses," she said. "You have not lived them." A bolt of anger surged in me. "And you do not get to punish me for someone else's actions." Evelyn drew a sharp breath and stepped even closer, her voice dropping. "You were chosen because you are his daughter, because your existence is the one weakness he left behind. And now you will carry the weight he escaped." My heart pounded. "You used me." "No," she said. "I placed you exactly where the consequences of your father's choices could finally meet you." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "That is not justice. That is cruelty, and you know it." Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of doubt crossing her features before she forced it away. "Go to your room, Olivia. This discussion is over." "No," I said, "not until you admit what you are doing. Not until you admit this is revenge." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Enough." I swallowed hard. "If you truly believed in your version of the truth, you would not be afraid of me opening one door." Her nostrils flared, and for the first time since I met her, Evelyn looked less like a woman in control and more like a woman cornered. "Leave," she whispered. "Now." But standing there, I finally saw what she had been trying so desperately to hide. Fear. Not of me, not of my father's memory, but of what was inside that room, of what she had done to bury it. I turned away from her and walked down the hallway, my pulse racing, my mind thundering with everything I had discovered. When I reached my room and closed the door behind me, the truth hit me with full force. She had married me for revenge. She had planned it for years. She had trapped me in a life shaped by her grief and anger. And now, she knew I had seen behind the curtain. She knew I understood too much. I leaned against the door, breathless, chilled, and suddenly aware of something that made my heart seize. Evelyn Harrington was not simply angry. She was unraveling. And in a house built on secrets, a woman unraveling was far more dangerous than any locked room. By the next morning, the storm outside had quieted. But inside Harrington Hall, the tension was sharper than ever. The house seemed to hold its breath as I walked through the hallways, as if it knew Evelyn and I had crossed a line that could no longer be uncrossed. She did not come to breakfast. The staff moved around with an odd stiffness, pretending not to notice her empty chair or my unsettled expression. Collins brought my tea and whispered barely audible, "Avoid her today." He never explained why, and I did not ask. I already knew. Last night had shaken her. It had shaken me too. I could not stay in that house waiting for her grief, her anger, or her obsession to snap in my direction. So I made a choice. I left the estate. I walked out through the back garden path, through a gate that housekeepers used, and down the long road toward town, hoping the crisp morning air would clear the adrenaline still buzzing under my skin. When I reached the main road, I pulled out my phone and called the only person I trusted with something this big, Liam Harper. Liam had been my closest friend in college before life had pushed us into separate corners of adulthood. He'd always been the kind of person who saw patterns where everyone else saw chaos. That talent had led him into forensic accounting. If there was anyone who could find the truth buried beneath old financial lies, it was him. He picked up on the third ring. "Liv," he said, surprised. "Are you okay? You sound shaken." "I need your help," I whispered. "It is about my father, and about the Harringtons." Silence. Then a slow inhale. "Where are you at the corner of Lakeshore and Birch?" "Stay there. I am coming." He found me 10 minutes later at a small cafe. I watched him walk in his familiar lopsided stride, cutting through years of distance. His expression softened with concern when he saw me. "What happened to you?" "Everything I said. And I do not know how much of it is real." We sat down and I told him everything. The West Wing, the documents, the accusations, the journal, my marriage, Evelyn's motives. Liam listened without interrupting, his fingers drumming lightly on the table as he absorbed the details. When I finished, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "This is a lot," he said, "but I believe you." Relief washed through me so suddenly I had to shut my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, he was already pulling out his laptop. "Let's start with what we can verify," he said. "Your father's involvement with Harrington Global, the collapse, the financial reports." I nodded, my hands still shaking. Liam typed quickly, pulling up scanned public records, archived articles, and bits of financial history pieced together through databases he had access to. "Look here," he said, turning the screen toward me. "These are audit records from the year the company collapsed." I leaned in. He clicked through several files, pointing at anomalies highlighted in yellow. "See this," he said. "These signatures, the timestamps, the formatting, they do not match your father's pattern." "Meaning what?" "Meaning someone modified or replaced parts of these documents." He opened another file, an internal email chain between executives, sent from an account under the name M. Harrington. The messages were odd, vague, almost intentionally confusing. "These are not just sloppy," Liam said. "They are designed to be discovered, designed to leave just enough trail to look authentic." "So someone set my father up, or needed a scapegoat," he said. "Your father's name being in those files does not prove guilt. It proves opportunity. Someone knew he handled financial reports. Someone knew he could be positioned at the center of a collapse he did not cause." The realization hit me like a punch to the ribs. "Marcus," I whispered. Liam nodded slowly. "His fingerprints are all over the parts of the company's downfall that do not add up. He had access. He had motive. He had something to gain." He opened another database. "But here's something more interesting. After the collapse, while everyone thought the company was sinking, someone quietly transferred assets into a private account." "Whose account?" Liam clicked. The details filled the screen. Marcus Harrington. My breath caught. The numbers were staggering. The timing aligned perfectly with the collapse. And look here, Liam added. These investments were made using funds that vanished from the company during the audit period, funds your father was blamed for mishandling. I stared at the screen, the truth breaking over me in waves that made it hard to breathe. He ruined her husband. I whispered the words sharp and bitter. But my father was blamed. Liam closed the laptop gently. Liv, he said your father was a good man. I always believed that. And this makes it clear he was not the villain of the story. My throat tightened. Evelyn built her whole life afterward on revenge. She married me because she thought my father destroyed hers. But she was wrong. Then you need to bring her the truth, Liam said. She might not listen, but she deserves to know. I shook my head. She does not want the truth. She wants the version that hurts the right people. Liam leaned forward, his voice serious. Then you have to decide whether you want to protect yourself or fix what her grief broke. I rubbed my hands together, trying to steady myself. She will not forgive herself, I said quietly. Not for marrying me, not for choosing me, not for the years she spent hating the wrong person. Maybe not, Liam said, but the truth still matters. He slid a small flash drive across the table. I downloaded everything we found. Documents, comparisons, signatures, transfers, all of it. I stared at the drive, feeling its weight long before touching it. What do I do now? Tell her, Liam said. And live. Be careful. When someone's identity is built on a lie, the truth can break them. I closed my fingers around the flash drive, feeling something shift inside me. Fear, courage, a quiet determination. I'm going back, I said. He nodded. Call me if anything happens. As I left the cafe and walked back toward the long road leading to the estate, the drive felt heavier in my pocket with every step. I knew what I was walking into. A truth sharp enough to shatter Evelyn's world, and a lie old enough to swallow mine. The sky had darkened by the time I walked back up the long driveway toward Harrington Hall, the heavy clouds hanging low as if the mansion itself had called them there. Every step felt heavier than the last, weighted by the flash drive in my pocket, and the realization that I now held the truth that Evelyn had spent decades distorting. The iron gates closed behind me with a slow, resonant groan that sent a chill up my spine. When I reached the front doors, they opened before I touched them. Collins stood there, his face pale, his expression unusually rigid. You should not have left the estate without informing Mrs. Harrington, he whispered urgently. She has been unsettled since last night. I stepped inside. Where is she? Collins hesitated. She is meeting with someone. Someone she should not have allowed inside. Before I could ask who, a voice drifted down from the upper landing. Smooth, cocky, poison wrapped in charm. Well, the voice said, look who finally returned to the nest. I lifted my gaze. Marcus Harrington leaned against the railing at the top of the staircase, dressed in an expensive suit that fit him like confidence. He descended slowly, smiling with the sharpness of someone who enjoyed slicing people open without touching them. Little Olivia, he said, I was beginning to think you fled. I kept my stance firm. You shouldn't be here. Oh, but I should. He reached the bottom step, stopping only inches from my face. This is my family's estate, my birthright. You're just the accessory my sister picked up along the way. I forced myself not to flinch. What do you want, Marcus? He glanced past me, surveying the foyer as though admiring a kingdom he believed he still owned. I came to talk to Evelyn, he said, but then Collins told me you were missing. Walking around town, stirring up trouble, snooping into matters far above your understanding. My jaw tightened, and yet you seem very concerned about my whereabouts. He gave a soft, cruel laugh. I'm concerned because you're becoming a problem. And I hate problems. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, especially the kind who start digging into things that should remain buried. My pulse quickened. He knew. Somehow he knew. Before I could respond, Evelyn's voice cut through the air like a blade. Marcus. We both turned. She appeared at the end of the hallway, her expression unreadable, but her posture rigid as if she had spent the entire afternoon assembling herself back into the woman she believed she needed to be. You were not invited, she said coolly. Marcus smirked. You never invite me, dear sister, but I always show up. Leave, Evelyn said. We have nothing to discuss. On the contrary, he replied, strolling casually toward her, we have 20 years of unfinished conversation. She stood still, jaw set. Marcus reached her and spoke with a softness that chilled me. You built this entire world out of Spite Eve. You turned this house into a mausoleum and called it justice. And for what? For Harold. For the company. For your pride, Evelyn didn't respond, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. Marcus leaned closer. You blamed the wrong man, and you know it. My breath caught. He knew. He had always known. Evelyn's voice trembled with contained rage. Get out, or what he asked. You'll hide behind your new wife, he said. Wife, with a sneer, flicking a glance at me. He took 2 slow steps in my direction. Tell me something, Olivia. What exactly did she promise you to sign those papers? Security, self-righteousness, or was it the fairy tale idea of saving your mother's life that convinced you to chain yourself to her madness? I inhaled sharply. You don't know anything about me. Oh, I know enough, he said, circling me like a predator. I know you've been poking around in places far above your clearance. I know you've been speaking to people you shouldn't, and I know you've seen things that could unravel everything my sister has built. His smile turned colder. And trust me, she won't let that happen. Evelyn's voice came out strained. Marcus, stop. He ignored her. Do you think she married you out of pity or affection? She married you because you were useful. A symbol. A loophole. A weapon. My chest tightened. You used her too, I said. You tore apart your family and blamed my father to cover your tracks. His eyes hardened. Careful, Olivia. I know the truth, I said. Your financial transfers, your forged signatures, your emails. You used the collapse to enrich yourself and make my father the scapegoat. Marcus grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to make me gasp. His voice dropped to a whisper filled with venom. You have no idea what you're talking about. Evelyn stepped forward. Let her go. Or what he mocked. You finally going to stop hiding behind your grief and do something real? Evelyn's composure cracked. Let her go. Marcus squeezed harder, then leaned close to my ear. Your father should have died sooner. It would have saved everyone the trouble. The words hit me like a slap. My knees weakened. Something inside me shattered. Evelyn moved so fast I barely saw it. She shoved Marcus back with a force I didn't know she had her voice breaking. Do not speak about him. Marcus stumbled, then straightened, laughing breathlessly. There she is, the real Evelyn. She stood trembling, her hands clenched. Leave. Now. Or what he taunted. You'll expose me. Let me remind you, sister, you built your life on a lie. A lie you preferred over the truth. Because the truth would mean admitting you were wrong. Evelyn's expression faltered. A flash of devastation crossed her features. Marcus smirked triumphantly. You can't protect her. And you can't protect yourself. He leaned toward me, whispering, You're in way over your head, Olivia, and if you don't walk away now, you won't survive what comes next. He turned and walked out, the sound of the door, slamming, echoing through the hall, with a finality that made my skin crawl. Evelyn remained frozen in place, breathing hard, her face pale with a mixture of rage and fear. I had never seen her like that. And for the first time I realized she was not the only dangerous person in this house. She was just the one who built the walls. Marcus was the one who intended to burn them down. I did not sleep that night. Not after the confrontation with Marcus. Not after hearing him say the one thing that confirmed the darkest truth I had uncovered. He knew my father was innocent. He knew it the entire time. And he had let Evelyn drown in her grief, let her build her life around a lie so deep that she no longer knew how to climb out of it. The mansion felt different in the aftermath. Colder, tighter. I could feel tension coiled in the walls like a wire stretched too thin. Any small spark could snap it. At sunrise, I made a decision. I walked to Evelyn's study with the flash drive trembling in my hand. She was seated at her desk, her posture stiff, her eyes shadowed. The lines etched into her face were deeper this morning, etched by a grief she had worn for so long it had become a second skin. She looked up sharply when I entered. "You should not be in here," she said. "We need to talk," I replied. "Not now." Now, I insisted. For a long moment she stared at me with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Then she exhaled. "Close the door." I obeyed. The soft click sounded louder than it should have. I stepped forward, placing the flash drive on her desk. She eyed it warily as if it were an explosive. "What is that proof?" She did not touch it. Proof of what? I forced myself to hold her gaze. That my father did not ruin your life. Her jaw tightened. "Do not start this again." "I am not starting anything I said. I am finishing it." When she didn't respond, I continued. "I met with someone. Someone trained to uncover financial fraud. He found discrepancies in the old audit files, forged signatures, falsified timestamps, asset transfers into one account." Her eyes flickered. "Just once. But it was enough." "Whose account?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus's." The silence that followed felt like the entire world paused. Then Evelyn reached for the flash drive with trembling fingers. She plugged it into her laptop, typed rapidly, and opened the files. Her face drained of color as she scrolled. Line after line. Email after email. Transaction after transaction. Her breath hitched. She covered her mouth. "No," she whispered. "This cannot be." She clicked through the documents faster now, her hand shaking so much she had to grip the edge of the desk. He stole from us," she said, her voice cracking. "He stole from the company, from Harold. From me." She clutched the screen as if it could steady her. "Your father, he tried to expose this." Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "I thought he hid the numbers. I thought he caused the collapse. But her voice broke. "He was trying to save us." I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The truth was in front of her now, unavoidable and unforgiving. She pressed a hand to her forehead, her voice trembling. "I destroyed him. I destroyed his reputation. I spent years hating a man who never wronged me." She let out a choked breath. "What have I done?" I swallowed the heavy ache in my throat. "You believed what you needed to believe to survive. But now you know the truth." She looked up at me, tears shining in her eyes. "And what will you do with it?" Before I could answer, the door burst open. Marcus stormed in, his face flushed with fury. "You think you can hide from me, Eve?" he shouted. "I know you have been digging. I know she has been whispering in your ear." He jabbed a finger toward me. "This girl is poison." "Enough," Evelyn said, standing so abruptly that her chair scraped the floor. "Do not call her that." "Open your eyes," he spat. "She is using you." Evelyn's voice dropped to a tone I had never heard from her before. "No, Marcus, you used me. You used all of us." She held up the laptop. "It is over." Marcus's expression flickered with something that looked like panic before he masked it with anger. "You do not know what you are talking about." "I do," she said. "I have the evidence. Every forged document, every transfer you made, every signature you faked. It is all here." He lunged toward the desk. "Give me that." I stepped in his way. "You are not touching anything." He grabbed my wrist, squeezing so hard I gasped. "Stay out of this," he snarled. Before he could tighten his grip, a heavy thud echoed behind us. Collins had tackled him from the side, pinning Marcus against the wall. "Let her go," Collins growled. Marcus struggled, cursing, but Collins held him with surprising strength. Evelyn pressed a button on the phone at her desk. "Detective Halloran, please come to the estate. I have evidence of fraud, forgery, and financial theft, and I have the perpetrator in the house." Marcus's eyes widened. "You cannot do this. I am family." "So was Harold," she whispered. Minutes later, police lights flashed through the tall windows. Officers entered the mansion with a warrant Evelyn had requested months ago but never used. They cuffed Marcus as he thrashed and spat insults at both of us. "You are destroying this family," he shouted at Evelyn. "You are destroying everything." "No," she whispered. "You did." As they dragged him out, he turned one last time toward me. Hatred poured from his eyes like poison. "This is not over." The door slammed behind him. The echoes faded through the hall. Evelyn sank into her chair, her hands shaking her breathing unsteady. Collins stood beside her, silent but protective. I approached her carefully. She looked up at me with eyes full of grief and something else, too. Guilt. "Olivia," she whispered, "what have I done to you?" I shook my head. "What have we done to each other?" She closed her eyes. For the first time, Evelyn Harrington looked like a woman who had finally confronted the ghosts she had locked away for 2 decades. But the truth was not the end. It was only the beginning of what came next. The house felt different after Marcus was taken away, as if some malignant force had finally been cut loose from its foundations. But the relief that should have followed never came. Instead, Harrington Hall sank into a heavy, aching quiet. A quiet born not of secrecy this time, but of a truth too painful to look at directly. Evelyn spent the rest of the day behind closed doors. I didn't see her at dinner. I didn't hear her voice echo through the hallways sharp and commanding the way it always had. Even the staff moved gently, cautiously, as though the woman who once ruled the estate with cold precision had suddenly become fragile enough to break with a touch. I lingered in my room until the silence became unbearable. I had lived in her shadow long enough to know she would not seek me out. So I sought her. I found her in her late husband's study, the same locked room where I had first seen the ruins of her past. The door was open this time. A subtle invitation or a silent surrender, I couldn't tell. Evelyn was seated at the old desk, her back straight but her shoulders trembling. The journal lay open in front of her, the same page filled with the words she once believed with all her being, words that had shaped her hatred, words that had shaped the life she built and the life she had taken from me. She didn't turn when I entered. "You should leave the estate," she said quietly. "It isn't safe for you anymore." "Marcus is gone," I replied. "The danger is gone." She shook her head. "The danger wasn't him. It was what I allowed myself to become." I stepped closer. She finally looked at me, and for the first time since I met her, she looked nothing like the Evelyn Harrington the world feared. Her eyes were red, exhausted, hollowed out from years of grief. "I destroyed an innocent man," she whispered. "Your father tried to save my company, and I rewarded him with hatred. I let Marcus convince me he was the villain because it was easier than facing the truth. I needed someone to blame, and he was gone. Dead. So I blamed his memory. I blamed his daughter." Her voice cracked on the last word. "You never deserved to be pulled into this." "I chose to come into your life," I reminded her gently. "That doesn't absolve me," she said quickly. "I manipulated you. I used your desperation. I tied you to my grief because I didn't know who I was without it." She closed the journal with a trembling hand. "I married you because I wanted revenge. I wanted the daughter of the man I thought ruined me to live under my roof, to see what he had taken from me." "You thought punishing me would heal you?" I said softly. "I thought punishing you was all I had left," she whispered. "But you were never the target. You were just the closest thing to the past I could reach." I felt a sting in my chest. Not anger, not fear. Something more complicated. "Evelyn," I said, choosing my words carefully, "you spent 20 years carrying a weight that didn't belong to you. You deserve to let it go." I do not know how she confessed. I sat down across from her. "The truth is where it starts. That's what my father believed. He always said forgiveness wasn't for the person who hurt you. It was for the person carrying the wound." Her eyes filled again. "Your father knew something I never did." I took a slow breath. "We can fix this. Together." "I don't deserve that," she said. "You don't have to deserve it," I replied. "You just have to want it." She looked at me then in a way she never had before. Not as an enemy, not as a pawn, but as a mirror showing her everything she didn't want to admit. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "What do I do now?" I reached into my pocket and placed the flash drive on the desk again. "You do the same thing you did yesterday. You tell the truth." She stared at the small device for a long time before nodding slowly. "I will call the lawyers in the morning. Everything will be corrected. Your father's name, his record, what he did for the company." She paused. "It won't bring him back, but maybe it will bring him peace." "And what about your peace?" I asked. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on a photograph of her and Harold on the bookshelf. Her expression softened with a grief too old to hide. "My peace died with him," she whispered. "All I can do now is stop myself from hurting anyone else." She ran a hand across the desk surface, tracing the grain of the old wood. "I will change my will," she said. "This estate, this house, these funds, they should not pass through a legacy built on lies. Evelyn." "No," she said firmly. "You don't understand. I don't want you to have this place. It would only tie you to the worst parts of me. But I do want to give something back." She stood and walked toward a cabinet I had never seen open. She unlocked it and took out a folder. Inside were documents she had begun drafting months ago. "I want to establish a fund," she said, "a scholarship, for students with no money and no support. It will be named for Harold and for your father." My breath caught. "You would do that. I owe him more than the world will ever know." Her voice softened. "And I owe you even more for surviving me." I stepped closer, unsure whether I should touch her, unsure whether she would allow it. She surprised me by reaching for my hand first. Her grip was cold fragile, but it held a sincerity I had never felt from her before. "Olivia," she whispered, "I am sorry." The words seemed to echo through the whole room like a long-delayed confession, a truth finally spoken after decades of silence. I squeezed her hand gently. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. Her eyes closed, a single tear finally falling, as if the weight she had carried for 20 years had finally begun to loosen. She let go of my hand only when she needed both of hers to steady herself. "We both have a lot to undo," she said, "but for the first time, I think I can see a way forward." She looked at me, her voice trembling with something almost unfamiliar. "Hope. Thank you for showing me the truth." I shook my head. "The truth was always here." "You just finally looked at it." She nodded, pressing her hand to her chest as if holding the broken pieces of herself together. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start over." For the first time since I entered Harrington Hall, I believed her. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a place where something damaged could begin to heal. The morning after we decided to start over, a softness settled over Harrington Hall that I had never felt before. Light filtered through the tall windows without the usual heaviness, as if the house itself had been waiting for the truth to cleanse it. The air seemed warmer, the silence gentler. Evelyn kept her promise. She spent hours meeting with lawyers, drafting corrections, signing statements, requesting old records, and initiating the legal process to restore my father's name. She moved slowly but deliberately, like a woman determined to unwind 2 decades of damage stitch by stitch. I watched her from the doorway as she worked her silver hair, catching the sunlight, her hands trembling each time she signed another document. When she finally set her pen down, she whispered, "One step closer, Harold." I knew she wasn't speaking to me, but to the ghost she had been carrying for years. After the legal team left, she turned to me. "There is something else," she said. "Something I must do before it is too late." I followed her down the hallway to a room at the far corner of the house. I had never been inside it before. She opened the door slowly. Inside, dust floated in a dim beam of light. The room was small, lined with shelves filled with boxes labeled with dates, places, and names. "His things," she murmured, "Harold's. I kept them locked away after he died because I could not bear to look at them. They reminded me of everything I lost, everything I thought your father took from me." She stepped toward a box marked simply Harold. She lifted the lid with unsteady hands. Inside lay old notebooks, cufflinks, photographs, and letters bound by a thin ribbon. "He saved everything," she whispered shakily. Notes from meetings, letters to colleagues, his drafts, his numbers. She removed one of the notebooks and opened it. The handwriting was neat, structured, confident. "Look," she said, turning the pages for me. He wrote about the discrepancies, about money missing from accounts. He suspected Marcus. He wrote that your father was helping him investigate. My chest tightened. I had always believed my father was a good man, but seeing proof of his integrity through another man's handwriting was something else entirely. Evelyn touched the edge of a page as if it were something sacred. He wasn't the villain, she said painfully. He was the only one who could have saved us. She sat down exhausted by the emotions weighing on her. I knelt beside her. You were hurting. You believed what you had to believe. She shook her head. That does not excuse what I did to you. I took her hand gently. Evelyn, forgiveness isn't about excusing. It's about choosing not to carry the weight anymore. Her eyes softened. You sound like him. Like my father, I asked. No, she whispered like Harold. She closed the notebook and returned it to the box before taking out a small item wrapped in fabric. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a silver key, the same design as the one I had taken from her purse weeks earlier. There were two, she said. One for me, one for him. She pressed the key into my palm. This should be yours now. I stared at it, feeling the cool metal warm under my fingers. Evelyn, keep it, she insisted. It opened the room where the truth lived. It belongs to you more than it ever belonged to me. I closed my hand around it, overwhelmed. Thank you, I whispered. She exhaled slowly as though releasing her last piece of resistance. In the days that followed, everything changed. Meetings with lawyers, statements to investigators, conferences with the board of Harrington Global to re-establish the true history of its downfall. Evelyn stood before them no longer a fortress of steel, but a woman determined to rebuild something meaningful from everything she had broken. She told them what Marcus had done, what my father had tried to prevent, what she had believed for too long. Her voice cracked only once, but she never looked away from the truth. The press got hold of the story within a week. Reporters camped outside the estate. Headlines twisted grief into spectacle. Some praised her courage. Some dissected her mistakes. And some, to my surprise, celebrated the exoneration of my father's name. But the noise did not matter. Something inside me felt lighter. Something inside her seemed to settle. Then came the day she collapsed. It happened during a quiet afternoon. I found her in the garden sitting on a bench overlooking the fountain. Her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. She looked peaceful in a way I had never seen, like a woman who had finally laid down a burden she had carried for too long. The doctor arrived within minutes, but the truth settled instantly in the air. Her voice had been fading for weeks, her strength waning. The weight of her confession, the relief of truth, the unraveling of 20 years, it had all caught up to her body. Before they took her inside, she pressed her hand weakly over mine. You saved me, she whispered. Tears blurred my vision. No, I said, my voice cracking. You saved yourself. She managed the smallest smile. Do not let the cycle continue, she breathed. Promise me. I promise. She passed away 3 days later. The mansion grew silent again, but not the same suffocating silence it had known before. This time, it was the quiet of a story that finally ended the way it should have. Not with revenge, but with truth and release. A week after her funeral, a letter arrived addressed to me in her handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Olivia, if you are reading this, it means my time has ended. I want you to know something you could not hear from me while I was living. I did not choose you because you were his daughter. I chose you because somewhere inside me I saw a part of myself. Hurt, determined, willing to fight even when the world forgot your name. You gave me the chance I did not deserve. You returned the truth to a man who could no longer speak for himself. And you returned humanity to me when I had forgotten how to feel it. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the only way to stop history from repeating itself. Use your life well. Do not let anger write your story. Let the truth guide you instead. Thank you for giving me peace I thought I would never find. Evelyn Harrington. I folded the letter slowly. tears slipping down my face, not from grief alone, but from the weight of what she had entrusted me with. The key, the truth, the ending she had never been strong enough to reach alone. I walked out to the garden where she had spent her final afternoon. The sky was a soft shade of gold, the same golden hue that had touched her hair the first time she allowed herself to be vulnerable before me. I held the silver key tightly in my hand. "You were right," I whispered. "The truth didn't free you. It freed me." I slipped the key into my pocket and walked back toward the gates of Harrington Hall, leaving the shadows behind me for the last time. The story that began with desperation and deceit had become something else entirely. Not revenge, not destruction, but closure, healing, and a future I finally had the strength to walk toward on my own. If you're still here listening to the last breath of this story, then maybe something inside you moved in a way you didn't expect. Maybe it reminded you of how heavy the past can feel, how old wounds don't really disappear, they just learn to hide under the surface until the truth forces them back into the light. Maybe you've carried a hurt like Evelyn did something you never talked about because you thought ignoring it was easier than facing it. Or maybe, like Olivia, you've spent years believing you were small, powerless, trapped by circumstances that were never your fault. But here you are, still standing, still listening, still fighting for your own kind of closure. Stories like this aren't just fiction, they're mirrors. They remind us how complicated people can be, how the ones who hurt us are often hurting themselves, and how sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop the cycle before it reaches another generation. Life will hand you pain that isn't fair. It will hand you betrayal you didn't earn. And sometimes it will hand you people like Evelyn Harrington who build their whole world around a wound no one else can see. But life will also hand you a choice. Hold on to the anger, or choose to be the one who lets it go. Not for them, for you. Maybe forgiveness feels impossible right now. Maybe the worst parts of your past still sit heavy on your chest when the house is quiet. Maybe the people who wronged you never apologized the way she did. But forgiveness doesn't mean saying what they did was okay. It means saying you refuse to let it shape the rest of your life. It means choosing peace over punishment. It means closing a chapter without letting it poison the next one. And if this story reminded you of someone you once were, or someone you're still becoming, don't leave without taking one moment to breathe and acknowledge how far you've come. You survived things that might have broken someone else. You kept going, even when you felt alone in the world. You gave yourself a chance to heal, even if you didn't know that's what you were doing. And if you're watching this on a quiet night, or in the middle of a long day, or while holding a cup of coffee that's gone cold because you forgot to drink it, I hope you hear this one thing clearly. You deserve peace. You deserve truth. You deserve a life not built from someone else's mistakes. You deserve a story that heals instead of harms. And if this video stirred something in you, if it made you think or remember or feel in ways you weren't prepared for, then don't walk away yet. Join us, stay with us, because this channel isn't just about drama. It's not just about twists or secrets or the shadows people hide behind. It's about people like you, people who've lived enough life to know that healing isn't linear and closure doesn't come wrapped in a bow. People who know that forgiveness is a battle, not a moment. People who've walked through storms and come out the other side, quieter, wiser, stronger. Every week we share stories that remind us what it means to be human. Stories of resilience, stories of second chances, stories of broken hearts learning how to beat again. If you believe in the power of compassion and truth and redemption, hit the like button. If you believe pain can transform instead of destroy, share this with someone who needs it. And if you believe there's still goodness in the world, even after everything you've been through, then subscribe and stay with us, because you belong in a place where stories aren't just told. They're felt, they're lived, they're reminders that no matter how dark the past was, it never has to decide your future. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for being here. And until the next story finds you, take care of your heart. It's been through enough.